Hey, good evening and welcome. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with part three because I know time is winding down. We have company, so I'm trying to get part three done pretty quick. Um, Not too quick because part three is a little deep. So I left off that the last time I had saw Sean was actually at the Taco Bell on South Anthony. So the following year, um, I had started. I started high school. So I started high school. I want to say in 95, 96. So this was like the fall of 1995, and school had actually like just started late August. So it was the second full month of school. So it was around October time. And I remember this day very, very clearly because my high school was still under construction. It was doing some renovating. And so I was walking through the halls, and all the girls in my school were crying. So I'm trying to figure out why they're crying. And then I hear someone say, they got in an accident on their way to school. I'm like, an accident on their way to school? So I'm listening. I'm kind of ear hustling. I'm not saying anything to anybody at school because I was still being that private person, not sharing any of my private information with anybody. So when I was hearing he, they got into an accident, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out who is they. And then I began to hear names. They began to say Mac, their friend, and Sean. And I'm not saying his name, I'm privacy because I tried to write this and I was switching names up. So only names I would actually say would be probably my own and my husband's. And so that particular day, I was like, what? It caught me off guard because I didn't know what to actually think about that part of it. And so when I got home, first thing I did when I walked through the door, I was like, Mama, guess what? Guess what? She said, what? I said, um, today at school, a lot of the girls was crying, and I heard them say that Sean and his friend and their other friend had gotten into a car accident. And so my mom, she was like, yeah, they did. She said, go ahead and go up to Abbott. She said, get your brother from school and come back home. She said, I want you to watch the news. I'm like, watch the news? She was like, yeah, you have to watch the news. So I walked up to Abbott, got my brother, quiet. It was so peaceful that whole entire walk. Um, I didn't know where my thoughts were or what was actually going on. I was just kind of like an autopilot where I was just going, 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 going. Whew. Um, for so I'm gonna pause right there. So for those of you who haven't listened to this story, thank you. Please like or subscribe, and I will greatly appreciate it. For those of you who subscribe and like the stories. Okay, so I'm gonna continue with part three. So we finally get home. So my brother has his snack, and my mom, she was like, we're gonna go ahead and watch the news because there's something that I want April to see. So my brother, he didn't hesitate. He was okay with it. So the news came on, and that was like the first story that they started to tell. My heart dropped. It sank because they said that two of the boys had to be airlifted, but two was dead on the scene. It was only three in the vehicle, so it was two in the front seat and one in the back. So Sean was actually sitting in the back passenger side, right behind his friend. So whew. So what I did was I grabbed the phone book. That was back when phone books was out. you learn how to use a phone book at an early age. And so I found the hospital's phone number, and I called the hospital, and I spoke to my mother-in-law. She was my mother-in-law then, but I spoke to my mother-in-law, and she gave me, reports of what she could. And I told her that I was praying for Sean. She was like, "Thank you, baby. We appreciate you because we do need your prayers." And so before, I was so intimidated, so afraid of her, but that showed me a different side of her, because it was actually something serious that was actually going on at that time. So I'm gonna fast forward because then my sister took over the newspaper route. So the newspaper route that I had, my sister had took over half of it. And so it was a newspaper story months later, and it was saying how the progress that Sean had made. And I was so happy to hear that he was doing so much better. Now, I'm going to go ahead, put a pin in that, and rewind, because after I spoke to him, spoke to my mother-in-law, I talked it over with my mama, because I shared a lot of things with my mama. Like, if I have best friends, but growing up, my mama has always been my best friend. It was always my mother and my grandma, hands down. But I did talk it over with my mama. She was like, "Well, if he's in a coma, he may not remember you." I said, "He may not remember me." She said, "He may not remember you." I said, "He not gonna remember me?" She said, "He may not." So when my sister had took over the route, I began to feel a lot better because it seemed like he was doing better. And I felt good that he was doing better. So, I'm going to put a pin in that, because as I said before, the house that we had lived in at that time, one of his good friends had lived there before we did. And my sister and I slept in the room that I'm not going to go into like the rooms that we slept in or whatever. But I don't know how you feel about this, but this is what happened to me at this time. Me and my sister, we shared a bed. And I remember that I heard, April, how Sean. So I repeated what I heard on the news, and then I repeated what his mom had told me. And so I'm thinking that my sister, because my sister tends to talk in her sleep, I did too. But I figured that it was her talking in her sleep. So I hear again, April, how is Sean? So again, I repeat what I heard on the news and what his mother said. Then I heard it a third time, April, how is Sean? So I kicked my sister, told her to shut up and go to sleep, repeated what I heard on the news and what his mother had told me. The next morning, I woke up and I told my mama, my sister was talking in her sleep. She said, "No, April, that was your friend." I went to school with goosebumps all up and down my arms. By the time I got home, my sister had her own bed. She had her own bed. So that was an instance that happened. And as I said, I was happy that he was doing better. So that following summer, going into my sophomore year, I thought that he forgot about me. So I remember this particular day because I was sitting on the phone with my best friend, and me and her was in a good conversation. I forgot what we was talking about, but we was in a good conversation. And I just saw like 6 rows of 3 boys in a row, and all of them were dressed alike. I knew who most of them were, but I wasn't paying nobody no mind because I'm on the phone with my girl. We having a good conversation. Then I hear my name. I'm not even looking up because I'm thinking it's somebody else. I hear my name again. I'm like, "Girl, I'm not going to look up. I promise. I don't care." And as I'm saying this, I look up. And guess who it was? It was Sean. So my mouth had actually dropped because it was Sean and one of his friends. So Sean was saying my name and his friend was echoing my name. And my mouth just dropped. When I said it dropped, it dropped. So I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So As it dropped, I actually watched them walk across McKinney Street in their rows. And I waited until Sean and his friend crossed the street. I ran into the house, ran in the laundry room behind the washer and dryer, and I screamed on top of my lungs. My mom and my best friend said it at the same time. What's wrong with you? And all I could say is, oh my gosh, he remembered me, oh my gosh, he remembered me. And I was so overjoyed with that instance right there because I actually felt like he was going to forget me. So now that is part 3. Hopefully I'll be able to edit and get this posted for everybody and come back for part 4. High school days. Bye.